Hello, and thanks for listening to the Farming Today This Week podcast with me, Kaz Graham. In this edition, hands-on learning for hundreds of school children.
So this is the lambing simulator. So you're going to pop your hand in, go through the bony bits, feel around.
I feel something.
Gently pull. Oh, there they are.
It's hot, hot, hot for livestock.
They will eat less. We will see issues with reduced growth rates, a reduction in milk production, and then we can get a knock-on effect to fertility.
And going underground, crops in a mine, a kilometre deep.
We have a lot of ex-mine sites around the UK. Could we use this as an opportunity to increase access to fresh fruit and vegetables?
But we start today with deer. Now, delightful as they look when you spot them in a field or in woodland, managing deer and keeping them off pasture and newly planted trees is a big problem for some farmers. When Helen Stewart took over her family's hill farm, she was shocked to discover the scale of the problem and wanted to find a way to control their numbers. She's poured her energy into a social enterprise which enables her to cull the deer and sell the venison, while also creating half a dozen jobs and feeding thousands. Richard Baines visited her at Knockbarry Farm in Perthshire.
I started speaking to different people in the industry, and they said for the incredible density we had, it would be a very high cull rate indeed. And I very quickly realised that we would really struggle to get them processed appropriately. I got told by one guy, you shoot 50 a weekend. The local game dealer might pick up 10 or 20 and just bury the rest, buy a digger. I was so horrified at the concept of venison wastage that I thought there must be another way. So I came up with this idea where if we sold a bit, rather than waste the rest, we would just donate the rest. So I started going around different food banks in Perthshire, and I met Jackie Mahoney, who's the manager at Blue Door Food Bank in Auchterarder. She was advising me that what people need is not a leg of venison. What people need is burgers and sausages and things that can just easily fit into their diet. That was really our starting point.
So in fact up here is where you have the infrastructure now to deal with the deer, your larder and butchery.
So here we go. So the deer come in here on this track, and then it goes right through to the butchery unit, which is great. You can see this is where everything gets butchered.
And you can hear more from Helen Stewart at Knockbarry Farm at 6:30 tomorrow morning in On Your Farm, here on BBC Radio 4, or anytime you fancy on BBC Sounds. Many farms have an education string to their bows nowadays, but perhaps not on quite the scale of a farm near Kendal in Cumbria that's been hosting primary school visits for the Westmoreland County Agricultural Society for the last 25 years. Hundreds of children from 42 different schools, including urban centres like Barrow-in-Furness and Morecambe, flocked to Roger Mason's farm recently to learn what farming's all about. 300 volunteers from the Agricultural Society help run the two-day event, not counting the 100 or so teachers and parents who help out too. I went along to join in the fun.
Right guys, so this is the lambing simulator. So you're going to pop your hand in, go through the bony bits, feel around.
I feel something.
Gently pull. Oh, there they are.
There's a big queue of children here, all queuing up to have a go at lambing, this lambing simulator, which is in fact a barrel with a sheepskin rug on the top of it.
Not just a barrel, got a pelvis in there too. Make it feel realistic.
That's Becca from Yan Farm Health, who's working with these kids here today.
Got it.
That's a lamb just being handed over.
Oh, well done.
Good job, Lola.
This is just a handful of the 1,600 plus primary school children who are getting a taste of farming life here at Heaves Farm near Kendal.
I'm going in with 2 hands.
Well, Roger Mason farms here at Heaves.
We're basically a dairy farm, milk 200 cows, and a lot of young beef calves, stall calves.
And you've been running this event on your farm for some years now.
Yeah, I've been doing it since year 2000, every 2 years. It's hard work till the day, but the satisfaction of the day itself and giving a bit back to the children to learn where the food comes from, and the milk doesn't come from Tesco's, it comes from a cow.
I guess part of the joy of doing this is the response of the children. We've just got a new group who've walked in here and they're looking at a tiny calf.
This was born about an hour ago, so some of the groups will have actually seen it being born this morning.
We did see the baby calf have its first steps. Its legs were trembling a bit. It was really cute.
Oh my goodness, it's so tiny. It's just suckling from its mum now.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen anything like that before?
No. It's amazing to see what nature's about.
What else have you learned here today?
If you eat Weetabix, it comes from the corn, the bits of corn that you don't use to make it. It goes into hay and stuff. I like seeing all of the different machines that they use on the farm.
So I am Lisa Andrews and I'm coming from Gilside School. It's so important that our children understand farming and the environment, because even though we are in the local area, a lot of them don't experience it in their day-to-day life and know where their food comes from. It's just wonderful.
Teacher Lisa Andrews. Now, all this week on Farming Today, we have been looking at some of the challenges facing the fishing industry, from rising fuel costs to the impact of climate change, from bottom trawling to visas and labour shortages. Mike Cohen is the CEO of the National Federation of Fishermen's Organisations, which represents fishermen in England and Wales. Anna Hill asked him about a surge of octopus around the UK. They're thriving because of warmer waters, and they're eating the lobsters, crabs and scallops, usually caught by fishermen.
What we're not clear about is what the long-term prognosis is going to be in those areas. Speaking to fishing communities in other parts of Europe that have also seen these octopus blooms, we know that there seems to be a pattern with this big influx of octopus in one year, a much more mixed picture in the second year, and then a third year that turns into either something like a steady local population and a predictable pattern of growth through the year, or that population moving on and moving away. We need a bit of time to work out exactly what the long-term picture is going to look like before we know how we can adapt to it.
There are other costs and pressures. At the moment, fuel prices are high. Now, some fishermen have had help. In Southern Ireland, they're getting state aid to help them deal with the impact of the conflict in the Middle East, and fishermen in the EU also getting that.
It is something that's very difficult for British fishermen. Trying to afford to go to sea alongside European boats that are working in British waters, subsidised by their governments, when we aren't receiving that support, is very challenging. Really, we're just hanging on and hoping for the best. But it's been disappointing not to see support from government when they have found money to do other things elsewhere.
What about fish stocks? Conservationists are calling again for an end to overfishing, no fishing of cod in the Irish Sea, Western Channel or South Celtic Seas in 2027. That's ICES, the International Council for Exploration of the Sea, is calling for. What do you think about fish stocks? Are they really low across the board?
It's a mixed picture, and we will start to see the ICES reports for this year next week. So we'll start to see exactly what they're recommending. And there needs to be a careful balance struck between immediate action and making sure that the fishing fleet can still operate if that's possible. The key question in fisheries management is always, how do we have enough to catch next year? We always have to be looking ahead and not in the short term. It can lead to some very difficult choices having to be taken.
Are there any positives for the future?
There are positives out there. There are a good number of healthy stocks. There are a good number of well-managed fisheries. There's an increasing recognition that good and local science should inform fisheries management decisions, and that's positive. And we've got the Fisheries and Coastal Growth Fund, a significant investment by government in the industry that's letting us actually do some of the things we've wanted to do for a long time, to change things, to modernise the sector. There are causes for optimism in a lot of ways.
Mike Cohen from the National Federation of Fishermen's Organisations in England and Wales. Well, he mentioned there the government's Fishing and Coastal Growth Fund, but not everyone's happy with the allocation of that budget. Fishermen in Scotland feel they have been shortchanged. We visited one family business in Dumfries and Galloway who say that the industry needs more government support and that 10 years on from the Brexit vote, leaving the EU has had a lasting and detrimental impact on their trade. West Coast Sea Products, based in Kirkcudbright, is one of the UK's largest exporters of king and queen scallops. It was started by John King in 1968 and it's now run by his 3 grandchildren, Stuart, Alice and Callum. They've invested almost £10 million in recent years with the purchase of 2 new boats, and they'd like to make further investments in solar energy. Laurie Carnacan has this report.
Sure, what do we have here? It's incredibly noisy and incredibly busy.
So what you're seeing here is quite a few king scallops being cut. The guy that you've got right next to you is actually the fastest cutter in the factory.
It's absolutely incredible. I mean, he looks like a man possessed.
He does, yeah.
We'll cut 22 kilo per hour.
22 kilo per hour, yeah.
That's more than a suitcase that you would take on your holidays worth of scallops per hour.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Why don't we get out of our health and safety gear and go and catch a seat somewhere a little bit quieter? We've just popped outside the factory. It's absolutely beautiful looking out onto Kirkcudbright Harbour Bridge here. Tell me how the EU regulations, Brexit, has impacted your business directly.
Fishing access, it's worse than what it would have been if we were still in the EU. Needless environmental health certificates and sanitary checks at the border. If we were to send scallops today in the past, the customer would have them at 5 o'clock tomorrow morning in Boulogne. Now it's like basically lost a day, so you're having to be ultra careful with shelf life. You've got the added cost of exporting as well, so I think it was about 150k for 25 to 26 on paperwork alone.
Is there any change, is there any light at the end of the tunnel in terms of these, whether it's biosecurity checks or export tariffs?
Recently there's been an expression of interest to get closer ties with the EU, but I'm just hoping the eventual benefit that we get is that the phytosanitary checks are going to be lifted next year and it will save us a lot of money with this needless paperwork. We know about 2 or 3 guys who've came out of the scallop business, good agents we work with for selling scallops, and they sold all their goods on to smaller customers, but it became too expensive and these guys lost their jobs, they lost their livelihoods because you cannot deal in small quantities to France anymore. So I think if they do enhance our situation just now, we'll be able to deal with the smaller customers in France again. It would be great to see that come back again.
The Fishing and Coastal Growth Fund was announced in October last year. Scotland was allocated £28 million from the £360 million pot. What are the feelings like now about that divvying up of the funds?
Just anger, and it's just nonsensical. Why would you divvy it up in such a way when we all know there's a higher percentage of fishing industry in Scotland, and it's no disrespect to English counterparts. Without sounding too political, I can see it with all the administration areas we work in for scallops, from Wales to Northern Ireland to Scotland to England, that we've become a fragmented country, and all this does is kind of drive that division.
Stuart King with Laurie Carnacan. The Scottish Minister for Agriculture, Marine and the Islands, Jim Fairley, told us we have consistently supported the fishing and wider seafood sector, adding the decision to allocate less than 8% of the Fishing and Coastal Growth Fund to Scotland was made by the UK government, not the Scottish government. And a spokesperson from DEFRA told us UK fisheries funding and grant schemes are devolved to the Scottish government, with devolved governments receiving at least 20% more per person than the equivalent spending elsewhere in the UK. The Fishing and Coastal Growth Fund is additional money that's been allocated using Treasury guidelines to help modernise the fishing and seafood sector, build resilience and support coastal regeneration. The Environment Agency has produced its first ever annual report into agriculture and water in England. It takes data from the last 5 years to assess the impact of agricultural pollution from farms and how water availability is being managed. The headlines are that over the last 5 years, there have been just over 19,000 inspections and 49 serious Category 1 pollution incidents caused by farming. Non-compliance with water regulations has dropped, but 40% of farmers are still breaking the rules. Nicola Appleton is the Deputy Director of Agriculture and Land at the Environment Agency, and she's been speaking to Anna Hill.
Our farm inspection programme has grown significantly, and so with it has the data and evidence we have. So we want to be able to show where progress is being made, but equally where further improvement is needed.
Can you explain how you inspect and whether it's making a difference?
The majority of our farm inspections are face-to-face on farm. We will target our farm inspections based on where there is the highest risk, both in terms of activity and sensitive water receptors primarily. The farm inspector will take an advice-led approach, talk through with the farmer any areas of non-compliance, and then agree an action plan. We do carry out a proportion of inspections remotely. It's roughly around 10%, and we will do those through the use of satellite imagery and look for certain areas of non-compliance on a farm. So particularly things like where we can see livestock feeders close to watercourses, areas where it looks like there's a greater enrichment of the area, and that will demonstrate additional nutrients flowing into the watercourse.
How much difference has it made actually alerting farmers to what they're not doing quite right?
It's starting to make a real difference. We started the increased farm inspection programme in 2021 following an increase in funding, and we now conduct at least 4,000 farm inspections per year. More than 19,000 improvement actions have been completed since 2021. If there is a more serious impact, we will take stronger action, but we are finding that more farmers are reacting well to the advice and are actually taking action to improve the water environment.
As you say, non-compliance with regulations has fallen, but your figures still show that 2/5 of farms are still breaking rules. Do you know why, and what are you going to do about that?
On average, we have found that there's at least one non-compliance in half of the inspections that we complete. That can range from easily fixed to farmyard maintenance issues, such as repairing broken guttering or putting in place a nutrient management plan, to more complex, such as inadequate slurry storage. So we do see a range there, but we are finding that farmers are working together with us on the solution.
In the period that covers this report, there were 49 serious Category 1 pollution incidents caused by farming activities, but only 36 successful prosecutions. How can you improve that?
Partly through our increased farm inspection programme. The majority of serious pollution incidents are related to the slurry storage and management, but partly by being firmer on those that do pollute. We do target our farm inspections, and we have a larger number of our officers working in areas where there are the highest risks of pollution.
Nicola Appleton, Deputy Director of Agriculture and Land at the Environment Agency. Now, it is hot. I'm sure you've noticed. Many of us have been sweltering in the third official heatwave of the summer. For farmers with livestock, there is the continual worry that animals might be overheating or not drinking enough water. But the heat and lack of grass can have wider implications than you might imagine for animal health. Farm vet Josh Swain from Synergy Farm Health told Anna what farmers should be looking out for.
Cattle and sheep, they can be particularly vulnerable to heat stress, and that's partly due to the fact that they're ruminants. So the rumen is a big fermentation vessel, so it generates a lot of heat itself. Like us, they will seek out shade, reduce their activity. They will eat less, or they will time when they feed to cooler periods. So if animals are eating less, we will see issues with reduced growth rates, a reduction in milk production, and then we can get a knock-on effect to fertility.
So what does it mean if it affects their fertility?
So we probably see like the conception rate drop by 50%. So it means fewer pregnancies. And actually that effect can persist for quite a long time. So in the early stages during the heat, we might see some early embryonic death. So the embryos just don't survive. But we will see poor fertility as a knock-on potentially several weeks after the heat events. That could last up to 8 weeks after we've had this hot spell. And even the calves that do survive, they have a reduced birth weight and they have reduced production later in life as well.
So it goes on to the next generation.
Yeah, and potentially onto the generation after that. Although the evidence isn't as strong, it potentially can affect the granddaughters.
In the east of the country and the south at the moment, there's very little grass. What's happening with their nutrition? Farmers
will be having to supplement feeding. And what we're seeing some farmers having to do in the really hot weather is actually house their animals during the intense heat of the day and graze their animals by night instead. There's a poorer pasture quality, so not providing everything that the animals may need, but also their requirements might be slightly different in the heat. For example, certain electrolytes, just the same as us. If you're working outdoors all day, you need to make sure you've got enough sodium, potassium, magnesium. But there's lots of different ways that farmers might supplement that. We can put mineral licks out, and some people feeding silage will just add the minerals straight to that.
Farm vet Josh Swain talking there to Anna Hill. Now, how practical would it be to grow our food underground? It's a question being investigated by researchers at the University of Sheffield who are growing crops more than 1 kilometre below ground level in a working mine near Whitby. They're collaborating with Farm Urban, a company that specialises in vertical farming, but usually going up vertically rather than down. And they reckon this farm in North Yorkshire is the deepest vertical farm in the world. Jacob Nichols, the project's lead academic, has been telling me what the mine's like.
It's actually owned by a company called ICL. They mine agricultural salts, so things like polyhalites. And where we're working is actually a Science and Technology Facilities Council site, which is a laboratory where they do research on things like dark matter and those sorts of space science fiction kind of particles and things like that.
Wow. And what are the conditions like?
So the conditions are why we're there. It's 1.1 kilometres underground. We're so much closer to the core of the Earth that there's a lot of ambient warmth there. Where we're working tends to be around about 25 degrees Celsius. And because it's a salt mine and all the walls are made out of salts, it's actually quite dry. So particularly good conditions for growing, and we don't have to worry about things like pests and disease so much because the ambient salinity of the surfaces and the reduced humidity reduce things like the opportunity for things like mould to form.
It seems really counterintuitive to try and grow crops underground out of natural sunlight. Tell me, why are you trying this?
This isn't a new idea. It's been around for a while. Some people have done modelling research on it where they've kind of taken the theoretical idea, but nobody's actually done it for real at this depth. We will incur the penalty of using lights for energy, but we won't have to worry about heating or HVAC, which is airflow and things like that, because that's already happening in the site. And the other side of it is that this is incredibly stable. That temperature stays at that level all the time, all year round. The work that we're doing is basically to collect as much data as possible to understand whether or not these systems are feasible. We'd also like to look at some other things like social return on investment. We have a lot of ex-mine sites around the UK, potentially in deprived areas and communities. Could we use this as an opportunity to increase access to fresh fruit and vegetables and for skilled labour as well?
Yeah, well, we do know that many big vertical farms above ground, ones that go upwards, have actually struggled to be commercially viable. Do you think this model could be?
I think it can be, because we'll be able to produce a really good understanding of how these systems work in the nitty-gritty. So how much labour they produce, how much energy they're consuming, how much biomass is coming out, and then work out ways that we can increase the efficiency of the systems.
And what are you trying to grow down in the mine?
We're starting with low value products like lettuce and a couple of brassicas just to validate that the system works, but also gives us an opportunity to look at food safety to make sure there aren't any unexpected human pathogens knocking around, which is highly unlikely, but we'll be able to assess that. And then the next phase, we'll be looking to grow higher value crops, herbs, pak choi or kale, coriander, basil, and that sort of product.
When do you think the first potentially edible crops will be ready for harvest?
In about 3 weeks.
And if you can make it work, what kind of potential do you think this underground farming could offer?
Huge potential. The thing is that controlled environment agriculture isn't the golden bullet to fix the world's food security issues. It needs to work with things that are happening in the conventional context. So when we start thinking about, in the UK, there's a lot of conflict about land use, and we can kind of navigate away from that if this is successful by going underground.
Jacob Nichols from the University of Sheffield. And that's all we've got time for. I'm Kaz Graham. The producer is Rebecca Rooney. And Farming Today this week is a BBC Audio Bristol production.